Welcome to Sikhcast, brought to you by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Santbir Singh, and I'm a researcher here at the Sikh Research Institute. Very happy and privileged today to be speaking to Dr. Pritpal Singh, a longtime speaker for the Sikh Research Institute and a current board member at the Institute, as well as an instructor at our annual Siddiq leadership retreats. And today we're going to be doing what I think is a really important talk with Dr. Pritpal Singh. We're going to be talking about his own personal recollections of 1984. Now, we're spending a lot of time this year talking about 1984, it being the 40th anniversary of the Kalukara. And we've been writing a lot of articles, creating podcasts, creating videos, all sorts of other information that we've been doing over the last few months, and we will continue to do throughout the year. But I thought that this podcast would give us the opportunity to do something different. A lot of our work has been looking at 1984 from a very scholarly perspective, from an intellectual perspective. And what I thought we could do today is try to look at 84 from more of a personal perspective, from someone who personally experienced what happened in 1984 to some degree and share their own personal recollections. And so that's why we're speaking to Pritpal Singh today. So, first of all, welcome, Pritpal Singh. Thank you for joining us today on this podcast.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thanks for having me, Santbir.
So, you were actually living in India during 1984, is that correct?
That is correct. In 1984, I was 9 years old, and I was born in India. I was living in UP, Uttar Pradesh, which is a northern state in India, in the city of Jhansi, where I was born. And I immigrated to US 2 years later in 1986.
So, what was life like in UP? Was there a large Sikh community in Jhansi where you were, or were you one of the few Sikhs in the? Was your family one of the few Sikhs in the city, or how was life like for you?
Yeah. Jhansi was Jhansi is a very old city. A lot of some might even say it's a very backward city. It's an area called Bundelkhand, which is in UP MP area. It's a historical city. A lot of people might have heard of Jhansi Ki Rani, who's famous for leading the battle, actually unifying Hindus and Sikhs against the British um, um, in the 19th century. Jhansi is also famous for Dhyan Chand, who's a famous hockey player who, when the Olympics were held in Germany, he was so gifted. He beat up on Germany so bad that Hitler offered him a citizenship.
Oh
So
wow!
Jhansi is known for hockey. It's known for its history, and I was born there and spent the first roughly 10, 11 years of my life. It's very underdeveloped city. Life for me in Jhansi was pretty simple. I was born in a lower middle class family. The idea was just survival, and parents always want you to study, and I wanted to play. And As far as Sikh population is concerned, there were few gurdwaras, but there was not a big Sikh population. And I lived in Sadar Bazaar, which is a Kant area near the Kant area. Jhansi is a big military base. So there were just a few Sikh families in that part of Jhansi. So life was pretty simple, I would say, uh, uh, back in those days. And we were a family of My father was a pretty nationalistic guy at the time. He was very pro-India. And we actually even uh, aligned ourselves with the Congress Party at the time
Mm.
because we thought it was a secular party. So life was pretty low key, you can say.
Yeah. And for yourself, was there any discrimination against you pre-84 for being Sikhs in a predominantly Hindu area, or were you fairly well accepted in the community?
Actually, pre-84, I don't remember any negative experiences. Um, there was a lot of acceptance. I would even say there was a expectation being a Sikh for you to assume a leadership role in the community.
Oh, wow.
Uh, my father was he worked for Indian Railways, and he was a Jhansi. We proudly say, we were very we say it with a great deal of honor that every train stops at Jhansi. Nobody passes Jhansi without stopping because it's a railway hub, and he worked for Indian Railways, and he was a leader. He was leader of the labor unions. In fact, when emergency was declared, and he was wanted by the Indian government because he was one of the leaders of the at the local level, and he had to go underground. So being with all that history, um, um, there was a there was an expectation for the Sikhs to rise to the moment whenever there's a need for the community. And I would say our family we were not well off, but people looked to us to take leadership roles just because of the Sikh history and what the Sikhi meant to them.
So, in the lead up to 84, there was a lot of tumultuousness in Punjab at the time with the Tarmiyad Morcha, with Sant Singh, and the movement that was going on, and the rise of the All India Sikh Students Federation, and so on and so forth. Did you feel any of that? Was there any of those reverberations where you were in Uttar Pradesh, or were you pretty far removed from what was happening in Punjab at the time?
Hmm. In Uttar Pradesh, in particular in Jhansi, where we were pretty far away from Punjab, and even Delhi, one could say. I think there are other towns in Uttar Pradesh like Kanpur. They probably dealt with it a little bit more. Uh, Jhansi having a small Sikh population. And keep in mind, I'm 9 years old. So my perspective is from a child at that point.
Yeah.
But I was doing this interview with somebody else, and the moderator reminded me Guru Gobind Pacha was also 9 years old.
Yes.
When Guru Tegh Bahadur Pacha shahadat hui sigi.
Yeah.
So I'm like, looking back on it, I can infer a lot of things.
Yeah.
But if you ask me at that point in time, was there any discrimination or anything? I think the closer we got to 84, there were certain question marks. Okay.
Okay.
There were certain there were certain hesitations, you can say, but there was nothing outright. It was more of I think we saw a change when the 84 occurred.
Yes.
That's when you start to see a change. But prior to 84, I would say uh, it was life as usual. But as we're getting closer to it, there were certainly question marks. There were certain comments made here and there, but nothing too far off the spectrum.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So June 84 happens. It's a shock to the worldwide Sikh population. I remember being in Vancouver and just my parents being just devastated, not really understanding what was going on. And this really was this incredibly traumatic moment for Sikhs around the world. Being part of that unique group of Sikhs who are in India but not in Punjab, how did June 84 impact you? I know you were a child, but how did it impact you? How did it impact your family?
Yeah. Actually, I remember it all too clearly because when June, when the attack took place, I was not in Jhansi actually. My parents had made a decision to travel to West Punjab to see the Sikh places, Sikh heritage places. Uh, so during the time of Guru Arjan Padshah's Gurpurab, we actually went to Pakistan to visit all those places.
Oh
So
wow.
that's why I clearly remember that time in history in my life. In fact, we went from Jhansi, we took a train, we went to Amritsar. We spent a few days in Amritsar. It was a very, very lively scene there. Was tons of people there, and um, we were hoping to see Jathedar Pindrawale, uh, but his katha got canceled that evening, and next morning we had to take a train to Pakistan. So when the attack took place, we were actually in Pakistan, going to different places with the Jatha, and the news spread very, very fast, and everybody was in a state of shock. And it was definitely a unique time.
Yeah, yeah. Um, how large was the Jatha you were traveling with? Was it mainly Sikhs from UP, or was it from all over?
No. Jatha was pretty big. I think it depends on at the time, I don't know how many visas they grant, Pakistan government, and traditionally they've given it 4 times a year for Jathas. So, um, well, let me say, back in those days, you crossed the border not on foot, you crossed it on a train. So
Yes.
the entire train was filled
Oh, okay.
with Sikhs, and most Sikhs were from Punjab. But there were definitely quite a few from outside Punjab, like Delhi, Bombay, and we were from UP. But I would say majority were from Punjab.
And what did you remember hearing about June '84 while you were in Pakistan, Punjab? What was the narrative that was being told? What were the stories that were being told? What were people's immediate thoughts in those early hours, early days after the Kalukala started?
Yeah. At first, um, there was a sense of just shock, utter shock, that how can this happen?
Yeah,
Um, it was disbelief that is this really happening? Um, I remember uh, because we were with Jatha, I remember a lot of people just sitting in groups talking and just in disbelief. And when reality starts to sink in, then it's more like, how is this going to affect us?
yeah,
Or not just on a community level, but also the Jatha, because we're in Pakistan and we're supposed to head back in a few days to the Indian side, and the practical problems, and there were issues afterwards too, which I can get into. But it was shock. It was multiple emotion. It was sadness. It was anger also, and then as slowly you digest things, you question yourself, your existence. You look for inspiration in Gurbani. So it was a multitude of things. And then there was a practical issue of how to get back home because our visa had expired. Pakistani government told us you have to leave, but the Indian side is not willing to accept us. So there was that that issue also.
yeah.
And I actually um, remember ultimately when we did um, when the battle was over, we stayed in Pakistan extra because the Indian side would accept us. And when we came to the Indian side, it was very, very graphic
Mm,
because the border was dead silent. We the train, you board a train from Lahore to come to Wagah border. There you clear customs. and then the checking occurs on the Atari on the Indian side, and from there, the train is supposed to end half an hour later in Amritsar. And instead of, when Amritsar was coming, everybody in India, when a train station is coming, people start to line up. And as we were lining up, instead of slowing down, the train sped up. And
Oh,
there
wow.
was an army in the station. It was extremely quiet. Army was pointing guns at us, and the train sped up, and it cleared the Amritsar station very, very fast. And there was a lot of people were scared if there was any noise, they would probably shoot us. And the train didn't stop anywhere in Punjab. Ultimately, stopped when it crossed the border of Punjab. It stopped in Ambala in the middle of the night, and then we got off at Delhi.
Oh, wow. Wow, that sounds like a really traumatic and scary, and I can hear your recollections. This sounds like it's still very fresh in your mind. How did you get from Delhi back to your hometown then?
Uh, well, there was no communication. There was no communication. Everybody had made arrangements because that's all the train goes to Amritsar.
Mm,
So, so I would say even before getting off, there was a sense of people were afraid that where are they taking us? The train's not stopping anywhere. When you only have like an hour to go from Lahore to Amritsar, you don't pack any food, any water. You don't do anything. So and this is 1984. So trains, they didn't have services built in them either, and so it was a question of what do you eat, what do you drink.
oh, wow.
I I I remember kids crying. I remember older people just don't know what to do. And I was very hungry. I was 9 years old. So I asked for food. And I remember somebody gave me two prashade, ekdam sukke hoye, like really, really dry. But when you're hungry, you don't see. You don't pick and choose. You take what you can get. So
Yeah.
I ate those two prashade with karbuja. With cantaloupe. And it's not a combination. So it was make do things.
Yes.
So and then people and train stopped in Ambala. Who knows? Some people got off because they didn't know where the train was go. And to answer your question, when we got to Delhi, they just told us to get off. Train ends here. So everybody who didn't was remaining got off. And Dad, being in Indian Railways, he had some connections, so he got some tickets, and we were on our way to Jhansi.
So now let's skip ahead, maybe a couple of days. You're back in Jhansi. Um, you the attack is over. The Kalukara of June '84 is over. What's the sort of feeling in your home with your parents? What's the feeling in the community? Did you have a local gurdwara that you guys
Yeah,
went to? Yeah. What was
yeah,
the feeling there? Now that June '84 had happened.
yeah. Well, the image changed very fast. Um, uh, those who we were close with, we still they still respected us. We still had some level of relationship, but the in the public view, um, we were not the image of pro-India anymore.
Oh, wow.
Um, we were anti-national. That's today's vocabulary, but that's what they would say.
Yeah.
Um, and it, it like things escalated where things didn't need to escalate. If there was a disagreement, you would resolve it through cooler heads, but now things didn't resolve. they escalated. There were more arguments, and I even remember I'm colorblind. I just wear whatever clothes, but I remember a few times I wore my Kesari patka in school, and few of my teachers told me not to wear that color.
Oh, wow.
So there was things changed.
So the change was almost overnight then, with the way that people were relating to you in the city. Then people started treating you very differently because you were Sikh.
Yeah, change occurred. Again, the ones who were close with us, we that didn't change, but in public's eye, the Sikh family stuck out like a thorn.
Oh, wow. And in those early days where there's still so much lack of clarity as to what exactly happened in Amritsar, um, the the human cost of what happened, how many people were shaheed, and so on and so forth. How were you getting information? How was information being received by your family? Do you remember any of that?
Little, but there was not much information actually coming, because you have to understand there is no internet. Nobody's, going Instagram live.
Yeah.
What you're hearing is there's one channel on TV, Doordarshan, so all you're being fed is what government wants you to hear. So there's very little information. We didn't have a phone. Most families didn't have a phone. So what information you got was like through letters from your relatives who were in Punjab. And it was not positive. And but but life for us was different, but being in Jhansi and UP, where Sikhs are very little in numbers. So
Yes.
there we were in a just mode of survival, trying to get through everyday, you know, your hassles um, and struggles. So information was very much limited.
So, and here we're coming, of course, to um, perhaps the most traumatic part of your story, from what I know, which is what happened in November of '84, and um, I guess that begins with Indira Gandhi's assassination by Satwan Singh and by Beyant Singh on October 31st of 1984. Do you remember where you were when you heard about the assassination?
Yeah, um, I I didn't know what had happened um, until I got home. Actually, I all I know was um, I was outside uh, in the streets, and just a random guy, older gentleman, he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I didn't understand his comment or question, and so I didn't say anything. And he told me that I should go home. I think he was looking out for me if I look back on it. At that time, it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So he told me that I should go home. And so I came home, and that's when I discovered Indira Gandhi uh, has been shot. And um, it was, it was again, we're shocked, and immediately we're thinking there's there's probably going to be something, but we didn't know what, right? So we it was more of an element of surprise that who did this, you know, one can assume why it happened at that point,
Yes.
but who did this? And then I remember my dad telling me that he used to listen to my grandfather BBC radio, and he said, "Oh, there were three people who did this." BBC reported, but government India first said it was two people. So it was just element of surprise, um, and just not knowing, the anxiety was there of you don't know what could happen.
Yeah, sounds terrifying, especially being a 9-year-old child. We know now, 40 years later, through the work of organizations like INSAF and through the works of the hard work of people like HS Fulka, that what happened in places like Delhi and in a lot of other towns across and cities across India was not an emotional response to Indira Gandhi's assassination, but a very calculated response, a very
Yeah.
planned out response, um, and one that took a lot of planning, um, one that was very methodical. What what happened then to your family in Jhansi? And was it something that looked like it happened with planning, or did it look like it just sort of occurred out of nowhere? Now thinking back on it, how do you understand what happened, and what first let's actually first start with what did happen afterwards?
Yeah. So the first night we were all scared and anxious, and but the night passes, and next day, we're thinking it's business as usual. And um, but it wasn't, because uh, Doordarshan, which is the only channel available at the time in India. Okay, it's not like now you can get pay-per-view and this and that or cable. It's the only channel available in India. They stopped programming, irregular programming, and all they did was show Indira Gandhi's body, and for the next, I don't know how many days. And all they showed was, it's something to like, and all they showed was a person or a group of people talking about the assassination of Indira Gandhi. So it would be similar to, imagine if you have like a Fox channel or CNN or some 24 hours news channel, and it's the only channel you have, and all you're hearing is repeatedly, Sikhs kill the mother of India. Sikh kill, you know, your mother. So it's like again and again and again reinforcing uh, um, that Sikhs are the enemies. Sikhs have killed the mother of India, uh, and the schools were, there's no schools. Uh, I'm 9 years old, right? If there's no school, I have no problem with that. I'm like, hey, let's play, man. Let's
Yeah,
play. But you can't play because people don't want to associate with you. Uh, you can't watch TV because there's only one channel, and all they're doing propaganda, government propaganda. So I remember that time from a child's perspective, because you have the time, but nobody wants to play with you, and and you can't even watch TV. So what do you do with the time?
yeah,
So you get bored. So what happened was, I don't know the exact uh, date, but it wasn't the night of the 31st or even the first. It was probably the second. Okay. When that a mob comes over, it's around 9 o'clock. Again, this is November, so it gets dark. We were sleeping, and there's a mob outside our house,
oh wow,
and they are demanding us to come out. So if you know India neighbors look very. The neighborhood is very small. You know, the galiyan jinu kehte hain, they're very tight, in the front of the house, and the houses are very, very close. So in our front, the alley was very tight, so there was a mob in the backside, and they're demanding us to come out. And my grandmother, actually, were all up because I was sleeping, but I was awakened by all the noise. So my grandmother goes up to the top of the house, and she sees to survey the information. And I don't know, there's tons of people, 100, 150 people. they don't have any weapons. They have sticks, you know, they're or some make to weapons. But they're wanting us, they're yelling us, they're cussing, they want us to come out, we don't come out, they call again and again, and we stay inside. So they actually light our house on fire, forcing us to come out.
Oh wow.
So the house is being burned.
How many
So we
of
have
you?
no
How
choice.
many of you in the house?
In the house now, there's me, my parents, my two other siblings. So there's 5. There's my dada dadiji, that's 7. There's my both chacha and chachis, and and few of other their kids. So there's a lot of people in the house. There's like 3 generation siblings and their own kids. So there's a lot of people in the house, and so at that point, um, my father had to make a decision. I've never seen my father pick up any weapon in my whole life. But he had a talk with his brothers, both of my chachas, my uncles, and we had kirpans. And he came out along with my chacha with kirpans and just swinging the kirpans. So I asked my dad much later, years later, that Dad, why did you do that? And Dad was like, I didn't know what to do. We know we had to come out of the house. And his whole perspective was, I need to disperse the mob.
Yeah.
So having weapons, he, you came out swinging, and the mob ran because they got scared. So mob ran, and the the actually my father did track down one of the people. We were asking, how did this happen? We discovered later on that this was not an emotional response, because there was nobody there that we recognized
Yep.
except one person. Okay, but it was most likely it was a people who came from outside. They were hired help, probably, or they were manipulated. And we discovered later on the person who identified our house, because Dad tracked him down, and he admitted that he was approached by the mob, and they were asking for which Sikh house is in this neighborhood, and he identified them. He identified our house, and so that's how we know what happened.
Oh wow. What happened after your father came out and your chacha came out with the kirpan swinging? Where did you go? Because your house is on fire at that point.
Yeah, yeah. So the house is on fire. They don't know what's going to happen. They're out there, fighting. Um, the we are desperate. We know we need to go out. Now, here's the interesting part. Houses are very close in India,
Mm.
and we have 12, 13 neighbors. They're all standing. This is what I remember as a 9-year-old child. They're all standing, just watching. Perhaps they were scared for their own lives. I don't know. That could be a factor too. But there was one neighbor. There was one woman who came and picked me up, my brother, and took my sister and to her house. And essentially, she saved us. Okay. And years later, as an adult, I went back to her actually. And I even took my kids back to her. I asked her this question, that why did you do what you did? And she said that I did not know what was going to happen. I thought probably they will kill all the adults, but let me try to save the kids.
Wow.
So there's a special, I learned a lot from that experience, just about in life, what a single person can do. Never I would say never underestimate the power of one.
Yeah.
You know, one person can do a lot. And they're very poor family. They actually make chaat. I don't know if you know what that is.
No, yes.
It's like you know, gol gappe and that sort of dahi bade. And maybe that's the reason I love chaat. I can have chaat every day for the rest of my life, you know. And I'm very particular. Jhansi chaat is really good.
Yeah.
So, you know, that woman and her husband to me represent and the idea of, you know, humanity. You know, you should be able to, and they paid a price for it too. You know, her husband was like the following day, you know, he was roughed up by some people. He was like, "What are you doing? You know, helping these Sikhs. Whose side are you on?" And his response was very simple: "I'm on the side of the truth." So, um, but that evening, she took us to her house. We came out. The fire was put out by um, the people in the house, and also some of the neighbors then started to help us. But initially they were hesitant. But majority just stood there. Some helped. So the fire was put out. Dad and uncles, they they when the mob saw them swing the swords, they got afraid. They ran. And that's how it ended, is the house was preserved, but it's obvious you could see a portion of it was burned.
Wow. How was it living in that neighborhood after this happened and seeing those people who had just stood there and not done anything that night?
Um, I, you know, the relationship with those people, you have to understand, you're like one of like the two Sikh families living in that neighborhood.
Yes.
So, just a year or two later, the other Sikh family moved. So we were the only Sikh family. So the relationship, I think that event was insightful because we knew who we could count on
Mm,
after that incident. So the relationships still existed with others. It was just not a close one.
yeah.
Um, and but that family, just to give an idea, till this day, I went in 2018. I took my entire family to, including my kids, to Jhansi. We went there for one night, and you know, kids are like, "Why are we coming here?" This, that. I said, "I want you to know who I am, what I am, in part because of this couple." And we went to their house, and my kids, who were very young at that time in 2018, I sat them down and I said, "I exist in part because of these people." And they were very, you know, modest at that time. I said, "No, kids need to know. I was a kid at that time. You could have very easily, you know, looked the other way, but you made a conscious decision to do something about it, what you were witnessing in front of you, you
Yes.
know." So to me, you know, uh, I am in part because of what they did.
Yeah.
So, so I have a relationship only with that family. I did not visit anybody else. Rest of neighborhood, they were like, "Come to our house." I said, "No, I'm only here to visit one family. That's the
Wow.
only family I visited. We had tea there, we ate, we talked. It was a great time. But the rest of the neighborhood, the relationship continued, but it was just not a close one."
No. Do you know how much anti-Sikh violence there was in Jhansi altogether? How did other families get targeted during those days?
Jhansi actually did not get a lot of violence
Okay.
because the DC at that time, we were fortunate. He he he. We found out that this later, that because and because remember, this did not happen the first night or the second night. It probably happened third or fourth night. So he was very well aware of what's going on in the rest of India. So he called in the police and the leadership, and he said, "If I hear anything happening, I'm going to get you, hold you responsible." So Jhansi was an exception, as opposed to Kanpur in UP,
Yes,
where there was
I've heard there was really very terrible violence in Kanpur. Yeah.
Kanpur was really messed up. We um, it was not just vandalism, but people died, very graphic killings. A lot of women, including young girls, were raped in Kanpur. It was very devastating. And Jhansi did not see that. Jhansi did not see any killing. Jhansi saw vandalism because
Okay.
we had a business. My Dadaji owned a shop of clothing, and that was vandalized as well. So, but Jhansi, you saw minimal stuff as compared to other parts of UP and Delhi.
You had said at the beginning of the interview how your father was, fairly nationalistic, pro-Congress party. In the wake of all this, did conversations change in your family? How did you see yourself? Did you see yourself as Indian still, or did you see yourself as outsiders in the country?
It was very confusing times, um, because you're a child. Um, you haven't developed, you know, uh, even emotionally or mentally, to have more critical sort of thoughts, but what's happening. And
Yeah.
somebody tries to attack and burn your house down, where you stand. So we didn't have any conversations at home because we were in survival mode.
Yes.
We couldn't have any critical conversations of how we were not in that stage. So we were just trying to figure out how are we going to survive because we are surrounded by people who don't look like us. And now the image that was positive is negative. So we were sort of reaffirming our connection with that family and a few others who had helped us. We were, my dad was trying to, I think this is where I think, starts to realize that India doesn't consider us citizens.
Mm.
It doesn't, it doesn't, there's a definitely different perspective when it comes to Sikhs. And it's a process because my uncle was here in America and he had sponsored us, I think around 1979. And my dad always sort of refused to come to America. He's like, no, India's my home.
Yeah.
This is where I belong. I was born there, did everything there. He's well respected, leader of railway labor unions. So I think between 84 and 86, you see dad starts to see that it's a very different, things have changed. And then finally in 1986, he makes a decision to immigrate to the United States.
And so 84 played a really transformative role in your life. I mean, you probably wouldn't have immigrated to America had it not been for 84, would you have?
I don't know because I mean, my dad didn't for 5 years. He had the opportunity from 79 to 84.
Yeah.
Um, so I think um, that did change. It's one of those events personally in my life, in my family's life, and obviously we know in our community's life, um, that changed the trajectory, I think.
Yes.
So yeah, we came to America. If maybe we would have come later, but it definitely preponed everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking back 40 years, having this very personal relationship with Jadasi, this personal connection to the experiences of what happened, what what thoughts go through your mind? What feelings go through your mind when you think about 84 and you think about the 40th anniversary? where do you where do you direct your attention to?
So I look at that um, on a personal level, not just, oh, it's been 40 years, what do I do now? I look at how my life actually evolved
Mm,
post 84. You touched on how it was there before, you touched on how it was after 84 in India. But once you come to America, there's that experience also of culture shock. And I immigrated to Midwest in Kansas City,
yes.
where there were not a lot of Sikhs. So I think what happens is all of a sudden, you were not accepted in your country, you moved to another country, and the people are mostly nice, but they've never seen anybody that look like you. So there's a series of experiences here too. So
Yes.
you question everything. You question your own existence. That am I meant to be even here? I didn't speak English, so there was a lot of communication difficulties. I was getting into a lot of fights. And growing up in outside Punjab, I didn't know Punjabi, so I actually spoke Bundelkhandi, which is a dialect of Hindi.
Oh wow.
So when we go to Gurdwara, ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਭਈਏ ਆ ਗਏ. That they made fun of us, my brother, me, and our whole family, that because we didn't know Punjabi. So it was a lot of confusing times. But I think to answer your question, I would say there was it came a point where we had to grow up fast. That how do you navigate through all these difficulties and not knowing what's going to happen? So you do a lot of soul searching. You take out time for reflection, and as we got into reflection deeper, we were very fortunate that we were able to establish a relationship with Shabd Guru.
Mm,
I think when Shabad entered life, it gave us a very unique perspective and about the meaning of life, and just what is the purpose of life, and it gave us direction. So the guru entering guru played a huge role and actually helped me make sense of everything, why this happens.
mm,
or and then I'm inclined, like you, Santbir, towards history, which
yes.
is my passion. And then I started search that this is not the first time that the genocide that happened against the Sikhs.
Yes.
So I think when you look at all that, then the answer becomes very relevant to me. So my feelings towards 40th anniversary is that this, the 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 Sikhs, it's in our DNA to give voice to the voiceless.
Yes.
We stand out because of our identity. And our guru has made us. We came alive through death. so so we are not supposed to be afraid of death. So I embrace these things, and I spend my energy now and my resources in sort of integrating Shabd Guru into my life in an environment, because that's what gives me sense of purpose and direction in life.
Mm,
So 40th anniversary, we should be owning it. We should be, celebrating it.
yes.
That we are who we are as a result of events like this. And it's not just like this in 20th century, it's like this because of 17th century. I'll give you one example, Santbir, and I know you're aware of this, but maybe I'll share with the audience.
Yes.
You know, I I I was asked some time ago, I don't know how many years ago, to write an article on like Mother's Day, and on my actually on heroes, and every single person I was writing that came to my mind was like all all men, and all of a sudden I started thinking, how come there are no women heroes for in my life? And then I started to think about Shabda Guru and I read more about Sikh history, and I couldn't believe that what I saw in front of my eyes, which was I exist today because of my Sikh mothers, what choices they made. So what I'm referring to is middle of 18th century. Um, Mir Manu, who was the governor of Lahore, he captured these Sikh women, young mothers, and he chops, their toddlers in front of them, and trying them to break their connection from the guru, trying them to convert. And when they refuse, he's so desperate that he says, just say you're not a daughter of Guru Gobind Singh.
Yes.
And not single one says that. So the message for me was not that they didn't love their kids. The message was their love for their guru was so great that I exist today because of the decisions they made. Had they not made that decisions, I would not exist. So for me, it's very clear that I should be celebrating this. I should be talking about it freely. I should be telling my perspective and what others' perspective are. I should be owning it.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your family and your experience with what happened 40 years ago. I think, I hope that our audience today got a glimpse of a really personal recollection of 84 and a unique perspective. We hear sometimes stories about people who experience things in Punjab, and we hear a lot of diasporic stories as well for people who grew up in the diaspora. But people who grew up in India but weren't in Punjab, there's that Sikh experience also that needs to be told as well. So thank you for sharing that. I hope that our audience has been able to really get a glimpse into what 84 means to Sikhs and the way that it, you know, though this horrific event also was a very transformative event for the community. And it brought a lot of people, and I'm hearing in Pritpal Singh's story, it eventually led him to building a deeper and more meaningful connection with the Guru, with Shabad Guru. And that's an amazing thing about Gurbani and sacrifice and trauma in the Sikh experience is that from it, we grow resilient and strong, and our relationship with the Guru actually deepens and becomes more meaningful. And that's something that we see throughout Sikh history. So thank you again to Dr. Pritpal Singh for joining us today on our podcast here. And I would recommend that you continue to look out for all of the different work, the podcasts, webinars, speeches, articles, and courses that we are designing for 1984 to continue this dialogue as to what 1984 means to us today, 40 years later. Thank you again. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Khalsa, Vaheguru
Vaheguru
Ji
Ji Ki Fateh.
You are listening to Sikhcast by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.